a face appeared on the bed sheet. A little girl slowly approached and lifted it, but there was nothing underneath. A burst of laughter came, and the face reappeared on the nearby sheet, but lifting it again revealed nothing. Suddenly, the reflection of a human figure appeared on a white sheet. The girl, trying to stay calm, walked up and lifted the sheet, only to find her mischievous sister. However, things were not as simple as she thought. The sisters started playing hide and seek. During the search, the girl was startled by a shadow that suddenly pounced on her like a vicious dog. As she tried to escape, she was accidentally wrapped tightly by the sheet, which clung to her firmly. The next second, an old man appeared in front of her, scaring her into a desperate struggle. Her sister laughed at her embarrassed state and asked if she had seen the old man. The sister pointed in a direction, and when they looked, they only saw black footprints and a tombstone. 10 years ago, their mother committed suicide, and since then, the sister has been plagued by nightmares. So, their father decided to take the two sisters to their old country house to relax. The old ancestral house had been vacant for a long time and was in disarray, with no electricity. The father and daughters slept in a tent for the night. In the middle of the night, the older daughter, Irene, woke up needing to use the restroom. As she walked out, she heard her sister's voice coming from the nearby house. She peered through a crack in the door, and suddenly, an eerie laughter came from behind her. A dark figure flashed by, but Irene dismissed it as her imagination. At that moment, the shrine's door made a noise, and Irene, curious, approached to investigate. She pulled the door, but found nothing unusual. The stone door then closed on its own, making her nervous. She held her breath and continued forward, only to find her sister sleepwalking again. Fortunately, their father arrived in time to carry her back. Irene told her father that there might be something unclean in the house, but her father dismissed her worries and told her to sleep. Concerned about her daughter's health, the father called a psychologist for help. The psychologist gave Irene a doll as a gift to build rapport. For the sake of treatment, the psychologist suggested that the sisters stay at her home. They were satisfied with the room, but the strange occurrences did not stop. While doing crafts, Irene heard children's voices outside. She followed the sound, thinking it was her sister playing tricks, only to find her sister lying soundly on the bed. Was it just her imagination? Just then, there was a noise, and Irene opened the window to check. A child suddenly flashed by. She tried to enter the room but found the door locked. Irene retrieved a selfie stick and slid it through the crack to film, but saw nothing. Suddenly, her phone fell to the ground in fright, and she heard her sister screaming from her room. Irene rushed in to find her sister having a nightmare. She tried to wake her, but the psychologist stopped her, saying that waking her up could cause harm. Meanwhile, the sister, trapped in her nightmare, was aware of the people around her, but couldn't wake up. Irene woke up abruptly, and everyone was worried about her fearful expression. Later that night, Irene, unable to sleep, washed her face. Upon returning, she saw a figure entering her sister's room. Following the shadow, she found a ghost pressing down on her sister. Irene quickly turned on the light, and the ghost disappeared. She told her father about the strange events, saying she saw a monster sitting on her sister. The father, however, advised Irene not to tell her sister to avoid scaring her. After the previous night's events, Irene decided to sleep with her sister, but her sister's sleep paralysis persisted. Despite being fully conscious, she couldn't control her body, seeing strange things around her. A large, dirty hand reached out towards her, terrifying her awake. Her father and sister rushed to comfort her, but her father was at a loss. Soon, the psychologist was called, and the sister recounted the events. Irene, feeling uneasy, watched, and the father was heartbroken seeing the bruises on the sister. Irene suspected the father and psychologist had a history and, in anger, took her sister outside. When the sisters didn't return, Irene climbed a wall to eavesdrop and saw the father being hugged by the psychologist. Angry, the sisters were startled by a strange person, causing Irene to lose balance and fall from the tree. The sister fell into a deep, dark hole. The father rushed over and scolded Irene. To save Irene, the father called a rescue team, but after 5 hours of searching, they found nothing due to the pit's depth. Feeling guilty, Irene prayed for her sister's safe return, clutching a doll. Meanwhile, the sister woke up in the dark pit and tried to escape, but a giant hand grabbed her. She bit the hand, causing the giant to release her. Irene ran deeper into the dark cave, eventually entering an experimental base where she found strange, abnormal people. Some were drawing nonsensical symbols on glass, others were plowing with a head on their shoulders, and some were laughing inexplicably at the glass. Seeing no normal people, Irene quickly left the area. She stumbled into a workshop with pictures of the psychologist on the wall, realizing the psychologist was the head of this place. CCTV footage showed recordings of sleep paralysis, including the sister's bedroom being monitored. Just then, she merged with a lamp and disappeared. Irene tried to flee but was knocked unconscious. The psychologist took Irene out, and realizing she could no longer hide the truth, she explained everything to Irene. The place was an underground facility for treating mental illnesses, particularly sleep paralysis. The family had a genetic history of this condition, which had driven their mother to suicide. The father brought them there for treatment. Learning the truth, Irene became despondent and went to the lounge, where she fell asleep. Then, something terrible happened. The lounge's hammock began to swing faster and faster, with the ropes tightening around her until only her head was visible. Terrified, she could only scream. When struggling proved futile, a dark shadow crawled towards her. Fortunately, the sister arrived in time to prevent a tragedy. The sisters begged their father to leave the place, but the father, uncharacteristically, became furious and scolded them. As Irene resisted, he lost control and strangled Irene until she cried out, begging him to stop. Regaining his senses, the father didn't understand why he acted that way, as if possessed by a demon. He boarded up the stairs, preventing the sisters from going upstairs. Worried about their father, Irene broke through the boards and found him sitting in front of their mother's portrait, muttering that he needed to stay with their mother. Irene reminded him that their mother was dead, but the father became agitated. Suddenly, the father was lifted to the ceiling, and Irene quickly cut the rope, causing him to fall. The father then ran out, and when Irene followed, she found both her father and sister missing. Desperate, Irene sought the psychologist's help. The psychologist found the father and tried to hypnotize him, but was knocked down by the father and dragged into darkness by a pair of hands. The father, still lost in his fantasy, saw his deceased wife, who asked him to bring their daughter and follow her. In reality, the father stood on the balcony with Irene, but the wife coaxed him to jump. A monster emerged from the darkness, but the father snapped out of it and handed Irene to her. The next second, the monster lunged at the father, causing him to fall off the balcony. Fortunately, the father survived, and the family moved back to the city, where he made a hearty breakfast for his daughters while recovering from his grief. The psychologist, however, wasn't so lucky. A group of patients she had imprisoned in the underground lab surrounded and tortured her, condemning her to spend the rest of her life in the cold basement. If you enjoy watching, don't forget to follow, like, and share this video, and I will make more horror stories for you.